Welcome back. Today is very exciting because I finally am flipping an Audi. I know some of you have been following this channel and a lot of you started with me when I was really into Volkswagens and Audis, and have been doing that for quite a while. And unfortunately, in order to make my business sustainable, I did have to stay away from that for a little while and focus on some cars that frankly no enthusiast cares about. I had a Chevy Impala, I had a Pontiac G6, I had two Chevy Cruzes, and none of those cars meant anything to me. Finally, we have a car that actually is a little special. It has a special place in my heart because I used to have one very similar to this. It was an automatic 2.0 B7 A4 that was from 2007. It was a slightly nicer spec. This thing was $900 in IAA, and I'm very, very happy that I got it. There's a specific reason why I think this generation is very special in Audi's history, and that is the fact that this is when they made that very, very significant redesign from the B6 and B5 generation, where it was a really old school design. I feel like this correlates with what Audis are nowadays more than anything else from the older generations. We have the big grille in the front, we have, you know, pretty cool headlight and taillight design that actually is pretty, it stands out. It stands out from other cars from 2007, 2008. Like take this car versus the Pontiac, for example. I mean, huge difference. I also think in this generation, you finally start seeing some good curves on the A4 models. And I mean, I just think this is a very good looking car for what it is. And hopefully this one doesn't have too many mechanical problems because it is pretty low mileage. I think we're looking at 117,000 miles on the clock. Now, right away, I'm not very happy with the interior of this car. I would say this is like a 3 out of 10 condition. Well, no, it could be way worse because the seats are not ripped, the seats are in good condition. There's not much wear and tear on this, but it's just incredibly, incredibly dirty. We have all this crazy dirt. I don't even know how this would all get in here, and it's also over here on the passenger side. But what is even worse, and what keeps me from wanting to get inside of this thing, is well, the smoking. This car stinks of cigarettes, and it is very, very full of cigarette ash and cigarette butts. Listen, I can understand smoking in a car, believe it or not. Actually, I had this exact B7 A4 when I was in college, and I used to be a delivery driver for Jimmy John's, and I used to smoke back then. I'm not proud of it. I have quit since, but I never used the ashtrays. I think using the ashtrays is where it just makes it so much worse. Meaning that you get all the ash in here and the smell just stays in. Obviously, smoking in cars, period, is not very good for the smells, but this makes it just that much worse. Anyway, on the good note, we have heated seats, which is great. We have Quattro. That is a big plus to these cars. That just makes these so much better in every single way. They did make these in front wheel drive that came with a CVT transmission. I would stay away from those as much as I can, because it is my belief that an Audi without Quattro, it's basically a Volkswagen. Let's go that. Let's go. Anyway, we got a key. We got two keys actually. That's pretty uncommon for auctions, and looks like we actually have some battery. Which is great. However, I don't want to risk starting this car up yet because we should check all the fluids. Now, this was the first of very many 2.0 turbos on these Audis A4s. Very many generations since then had this exact, well, not exact, but you know, somewhat similar motor, the 2.0 turbo. And very, very good news, we have a brand new timing belt at 85,000 miles. That means there's a lot less work for me to do because I was expecting to have to do timing on this, but looks like it's been done. And overall, this engine bay looks to be in decent shape, except we have practically no coolant. But we do have oil. It is very dirty, very brown, very used, but I'm not seeing anything incredibly dangerous on here. So this thing is definitely going to need a oil change, and it is also definitely, desperately going to need a valve cover gasket. This thing is just dumping oil, and it's crazy that we're missing coolant, but we have a good amount of oil in the car. I guess from my perspective, having no coolant but having oil in the car is a lot more plausible. I'm very glad that we have the oil in the motor, but you know, still would have been nice to have some coolant. I think I'm just gonna fill this up. I do wonder where it's leaking from. There's a very common leak area in the back of the engine. There's a coolant flange in the back here that does like leaking coolant. I remember doing that on my car. It is not a fun job, but it is doable as long as you're willing to scratch the crap out of your hands. Okay, so I think I found our leak. That definitely didn't take long at all. So Elephant in the room, the reason why it ended up on IEA is because it did get into a bit of a front end accident here, potentially smacked a curb or something along those lines, and well, apparently it smacked our radiator too. I should have checked for that, but it's not really visible. Oh yeah, that is smoked, and so is our AC condenser. That's unfortunate. Okay, well, I could have avoided the situation by checking our radiator first, but well, I didn't, and that is entirely my fault. I'm sorry for polluting the environment with our coolant and wasting all this, but oh well. So now I guess we do have to get it into the shop rather than getting a test drive in, but at least we can see how well it starts. Ooh, started right up. There's also quite a bit of a vibration. Potentially we have an issue with like an engine mount or something like that. But anyway, I guess we gotta get it inside the shop because it's going to start overheating sooner rather than later. So yeah, she's not perfect, but this is an 18-year-old car. We gotta remember that. And for a car that just became an adult, I think she's doing pretty good. This is probably the most disappointing spot. We do have a very, very rusty fender here, like actually penetrating rust. Very sad to see that. I feel like this is relatively uncommon for at least 100,000 miles. What, I already forgot, what is it at? 115,000 miles is a pretty small amount of miles, and it's sad to see it rust like this. German cars are usually not like that. That's something you're definitely gonna see a lot with domestics. They rust like crazy, but luckily Germans know how to make decent paint, or at least use decent steel. I don't know what the difference is. All I can tell you is that German cars will generally stay much better in terms of rust. We're definitely gonna need a new radiator, potentially the AC condenser. Well, actually, definitely AC condenser. There's no way about it. I'm probably gonna have to recharge the AC. The bumper itself is gonna stay on the car. I believe I'm gonna be able to plastic weld it to make it look okay. It's definitely not going to be perfect, but it's gonna be way better than it is now, and it's gonna be staying in one piece, and that's all that really matters. As always, it's gonna be a relatively budget repair vehicle. After all, we did spend $900 on it. To clarify, $900 bid with all the fees and everything. I think I spent $1,400, close to $1,500. I believe a car like this should be able to sell for maybe $4 grand if we get it looking pretty nice, if we make sure it has AC. I think $4 grand is doable. I'm probably going to have to replace this if I want to sell it for that much. So that will probably depend on junkyard parts availability if we find a clean fender of this color. The fact that it has timing done is a big selling point. Looks like our transmission is working. I was slightly concerned about that because there is a built-in cooler into the radiator. The transmission cooler is one part with the coolant radiator, and that could have leaked. But luckily it didn't. Looks like our trans is doing great. The transmissions were a big problem on early 2000s cars from Audi and Volkswagen, the automatic transmissions that is. But luckily I personally haven't had many issues or heard of many issues with these. And we also do have a check engine light, which is probably to be expected. Chances are it's something simple like evap or boost leak or something like that. Shouldn't be too big of a problem, shouldn't be too big of a project, at least fingers crossed as always. And yeah, let's get to it. Now, under the car. This looks really nice and dry. It doesn't seem like we have any engine oil leaks. Apart from the valve cover gasket, of course, because we already know that leaks. But there are definitely some seepage coming from the oil filter. Might just be from oil changes, might be an actual gasket leak. Nothing to be concerned about. Looks like we have had the flex pipe replaced and the walls look pretty nice on this. I would say things look totally adequate here. We have a tiny bit of amount of oil right around here. Nothing to be concerned about whatsoever. Some oil by the oil filter, which again is something you're going to see very frequently, especially when the oil filter is located in such a bad spot for filter changes. The good news is that our intercooler here is in good shape. I don't see any sort of damage on it. All right, so we have the valve cover gasket replaced. I cleaned up the engine bay a little bit. I still need to do some vacuuming to get rid of all this evidence of critters. We have a bunch of little nuts in here. I'm just gonna have to vacuum this out. It's gonna be pretty hard to get in there, but we'll do our best to make it look a little more presentable. Now we're going to replace our N80 valve. Luckily, this is quite a cheap part, so I didn't mind ordering it, and hopefully Hopefully this thing is going to help us get rid of our check engine light. Unplug the electrical connection and pop out these hoses, which is going to be a little harder than you anticipate due to these stupid clamps. There we go. Oh yeah, this thing is definitely blown, which is great news because that means that once we clear our coats, they're not going to come back. And the reason why I know it's blown is because when I blow into it, air going through it, which should not be happening unless there's 12 volts being applied to this connector here. So this thing is definitely blown. We're going to throw in our new one, which is an OEM Bosch replacement. And if we blow into this thing, nothing goes through. There's no air passing through this thing, which is exactly what we want. I really don't get why auto manufacturers like to use those crimp style hose clamps when these are just so much simpler to take off and I feel like to put on even. I think we're ready to fill up our coolant. We're gonna make sure we don't have any leaks. I also am gonna have to fill up our transmission fluid because some of the transmission fluid did leak out when we were replacing the radiator. And should probably change our oil because that did look a little too dark. And lastly, we just need to reinstall all of our hardware for the fender liners, bumper, and the skid plate under the car. This thing, however, is what really bums me out because I suck at bodywork and I do have a body guy who could fix this, but I don't really know if it makes sense to do it on this car because if I were to pay him, it would cost me at least a few $100s when you know, I could probably just buy and respray a brand new fender for about the same price. Instead, maybe I'm gonna try and bondo this myself just to make it look a little better. I'm gonna disclose that this thing was rusty, but it's still gonna be an improvement if I just bondo it with fiberglass bondo and try and make it look better than it is. Let's drain our oil. Oh no, oh no, oh no, 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 no. We have drippage. No. Is my brand new radiator leaking? This coolant leak is definitely going to really impact my plans because I was really hoping to have this car ready today, but if I have to wait for a new radiator, not gonna be the case. Yeah, you can see it clear as day that my coolant is just actively dripping out of the radiator. All right, the coolant is now drained. I have ordered the radiator, which should be here tomorrow. God bless Amazon. I generally wouldn't use an Amazon brand radiator, but honestly, it's fine at this point. It had good reviews, so I don't really have any concerns. Man, this is so unfortunate. We're gonna have to rip off the bumper again, which fine, it's not that big of a deal. In the meantime, I guess we should do the oil change since we need to do that anyway and work on our fender. As soon as you pop this thing out, your oil just goes all over the place. I think I'm gonna start by removing the surface rust as well as any loose paint using a wire wheel basically on a drill. Oh no, we got big rust here. This is a bit too far gone, guys. But then the problem is if I buy a new fender, I have to paint it, and that's gonna be like 150, 200 bucks. I don't think I can fix this. Nope, this is ridiculous. Look at that. All right, we have received our brand new radiator. Hopefully we have much better luck with this one this time. You cannot be serious. We're dripping coolant. We're again dripping coolant from the same spot in the radiator. What? I know it's definitely not leaking from a coolant pipe because both of our coolant pipes are on that side. So there's nothing here except for the transmission cooler, which obviously shouldn't be leaking coolant unless the radiator is poorly built. so far it seems like we are no longer leaking coolant, which is great news. That's just from me spilling, don't worry. She's driving really well, really well. I'm pretty happy. Like, this alignment is perfect. There's no shakes. We do have a bit of a vibration from our engine mounts, I assume. It's not like terrible, but if I wanted to get this car to 100%, I would do them. But considering the fact that this is a $3,000 to $4,000 car, I think we're not going to. And then there's this noise from somewhere in the HVAC system. And I believe it's coming from this little motor. Looks like I didn't realize that there were 3 bolts holding this in. For some reason I unbolted these 2 and thought we were done. Turns out we were not. There's one more, but that's okay. I think this thing is going to stay in place with just the 1 bolt holding it in place. Alright, the ignition is now turned on. Okay, it's doing something. There we go, it's doing that again. Huh. So for whatever reason, it doesn't see that it's in the full open or closed position. The cheapest one of these that I found was of a slightly different variation, so I did have to swap these arms. Alright guys, the motor is in. I'm not even going to pretend the top little screw that holds that in there, it's not invisible. I don't even think that's going to go in. I wish I had the ability to turn my hands into like super long, tiny little 5-year-old hands. Then I would have been able to make this happen, but currently just not an option. I can't get in there. But what I can do is test if that thing works. So I'm gonna change our temperature from low to high. And there we go, we can see it move. So we successfully did what we needed to do. Perfect, and this thing is not making any noise, so even better. After being on the marketplace for 2 weeks, it finally sold. It started out with a price of $4,200. After 1 week, I lowered it to $37,000, and then the buyer negotiated down to $32,000. I definitely could have gotten more for it if I decided to wait, but I already had multiple people come and check it out, and they ended up backing out. At which point I was sick of it and wanted it gone. So in the end, we have a total of $2,400 spent on this car, and with a sale price of $32,000, we are looking at just a little over $800 profit. This is far from ideal or even average profit on a car for me. I guess this should serve as a reminder to myself that it's much harder to sell Audis, as sad as that may be. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and take a look at these other 2 videos. YouTube seems to think that you'll like them.